This is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Friday, January 3rd, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, President Biden reviewed options to bomb Iran. So Axios reported on Thursday that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan presented President Biden with options to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities during a secret meeting held a few weeks ago. The report said the U.S. was considering bombing Iran's nuclear facilities if Tehran moves toward making a nuclear weapon. But right now, there's no evidence that Iran has decided to build a nuclear bomb. That is something that has been acknowledged recently by the CIA, by Bill Burns, the director of the CIA. Sources told Axios that Biden did not greenlight a strike on Iran during the meeting and did not make any final decision. So based on this report, he just reviewed some options. They just discussed the idea of bombing Iran, but didn't make any plans to actually do it. The report said the purpose of the meeting was only to discuss how they would respond if Iran began enriching uranium at 90%, the level needed to produce a weapon. One source said that there are no active discussions about bombing Iran before President-elect Donald Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. So this report comes after there's been all sorts of reports and even kind of open discussion among Israeli officials about the idea of bombing Iran's nuclear program now, during the transition period. And they see the regime change in Syria as an opportunity to do so. They took out a bunch of air defenses in Syria, saying that makes it easier for Israeli warplanes to bomb Iran. As far as I understand it, the last time they launched airstrikes on Iran, they did it from Iraqi airspace that was essentially controlled by the U.S. But anyway, and then there was also recently a report from the Wall Street Journal that said the Trump transition team has been discussing the idea of striking Iranian nuclear facilities. And that report said Trump discussed the idea with Netanyahu. So when it comes to Iran's nuclear program, what's all the fuss about? Iran is currently enriching some of its uranium at 60%. And this is a step that Iran took back in 2021. So this isn't anything new. And this was a response to an Israeli sabotage attack on Iran's Natanz nuclear facility. So Israeli covert attacks on Iran's nuclear program usually end up in Iran increasing its nuclear activity, and then they point to that as evidence of them racing toward a bomb. Again, even though it's a reaction to something Israel did. And the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, known as the JCPOA, that Trump withdrew from in 2018 with encouragement from Netanyahu. Netanyahu was really pushing him to pull out of that deal. That deal capped Iran's enrichment at 3.67%. So the timeline when it comes to Iranian uranium enrichment is this. The U.S. pulled out of the JCPOA in 2018. Iran kept enriching uranium at 3.67%. They said they were giving the European countries that were signatories to the JCPOA time to offset the sanctions. They waited a year and then they started increasing some uranium enrichment, I think only up to like 5%. It wasn't anything significant. Then in 2020, during the transition period between Trump and Biden, Israel assassinated an Iranian nuclear scientist inside Iran. In response to that, Iran started enriching uranium at 20%. And then in 2021, when Biden came in, Israel did a sabotage attack. They detonated an explosive at Iran's Natanz nuclear facility. And they did that when the U.S. and Iran just started negotiations on potentially reviving the Iran nuclear deal. So Iran did it with the intention of sabotaging those negotiations. Of course, the U.S. didn't say a bad word about it. And then Iran responded by taking the step to increase uranium enrichment to 60%, which is the highest level they've ever done, but it is still below that 90% needed for weapons grade. Now, there has been a conversation in Iran We've seen statements from members of the Iranian parliament saying that Iran should reconsider its policy, its prohibition on the development of nuclear weapons in response to the Israeli aggression in the region. But there's no sign that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is considering lifting his 2003 fatwa that banned the development of all weapons of mass destruction. So that's the situation. And Iran is also a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. So that's another safeguard. They are inspected by the IAEA. All their nuclear facilities are civilian nuclear facilities, despite all this hype. And in contrast, Israel is not a signatory to the NPT, and they have a secret nuclear weapons program. They're estimated to have a few hundred nuclear warheads. The U.S. does not recognize, pretends like it doesn't exist, because there are foreign assistance laws that actually ban military aid to countries that have nuclear weapons and don't sign the NPT. So, it's always very crucial context when we talk about all this hype about Iran potentially making a nuclear weapon. It's always missing from kind of the mainstream narrative. You never hear about Israeli nukes, but they exist. All right, so the next one here, suspect in Las Vegas bombing was a Green Beret. So this is the Tesla Cybertruck bombing. And pretty much right after I posted this show yesterday, in yesterday's show, I said they haven't identified the guy. It was like a few minutes after my show posted that I saw they identified him. So the suspect in Wednesday's Tesla Cybertruck bombing that occurred outside a Trump hotel in Las Vegas has been identified as 37-year-old Matthew Allen Livelsberger, an active duty U.S. Army Green Beret. So another Army veteran, and he was actually active duty. Livelsberger was identified as the person who rented the Cybertruck, and his IDs and credit cards were found in the vehicle, but the body was burned beyond recognition, and authorities say they're still waiting on a DNA test to confirm his identity. So this is a strange story. To me, it seems like something doesn't add up here. It just doesn't make much sense. So the Cybertruck was blown up using firework mortars and gas canisters, which is a crude explosive for someone with this guy's military experience. That's something some of his family members said, saying, he really knew his way around explosives. It's weird that it was fireworks and gas canisters that he used. The body had a gunshot wound to the head. Authorities are saying that it was self-inflicted, so they're saying that he killed himself before detonating these explosives. And Cybertrucks can be self-driving. This is Tesla Cybertrucks. They can drive themselves, so people are speculating that maybe he could have been dead before the truck even showed up at the hotel, and then the explosives could have been on a timer and detonated that way. That's just speculation. But that is a whole element to this, that it is a car that can be self-driving. There's other people theorizing maybe he was a patsy and he was killed and then somebody sent him in, but who knows? I don't want to get too much into those theories, but the details here it's just strange. It's a very strange story. So Las Vegas Sheriff Kevin McMahill said that he was, quote, comfortable calling it a suicide with a bombing that occurred immediately after, end quote. No one else was killed in the blast, and 7 people nearby sustained minor injuries. The bombing occurred just a few hours after Shamsud Din Jabbar, another U.S. Army veteran, plowed a truck into a crowd in New Orleans, killing 15. The FBI said there's no definitive link between the two incidents, though there are some similarities. This is a picture of Livelsberger from his LinkedIn account. So both of these guys, Livelsberger and Jabbar, used the app Turo to rent the vehicles they used, and both men had previously served at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. So there's a connection there, but at the same time, Fort Bragg is huge. It's one of the biggest military bases in the world by population size. But a lot of strange things happen at Fort Bragg, a lot of suicide, a lot of drug overdoses, sexual abuse. Again, it is big. It's like something like 50,000 people live there. But, this could also be an elaborate suicide that this guy did. And the suicide rates are so high among veterans and everything. So the FBI said that Jabbar declared his loyalty to ISIS. Again, this is the New Orleans attack, but this guy, Livelsberger, there's no sign yet. You never know what could come out, but there's no sign that he was motivated by anything ISIS related. And he was a decorated combat veteran who had been in the Army for 20 years. The U.S. Army said that he had been deployed to Afghanistan twice and also served in Ukraine, Tajikistan, Georgia, and the Congo. The motive for this bombing is unclear. Again, it could be a suicide. Maybe there's a possibility it wasn't him that actually did it. There's obviously symbolism here, using a Tesla vehicle in front of a Trump hotel. That suggests it could have been meant as a symbolic thing, since Elon Musk was a big supporter of Trump. But the fact is, we don't know. And his social media activity makes it seem like he supported Trump. And that's what his uncle, Dean Livelsberger, told The Independent. He said, quote, "He loved Trump, and he was always a very, very patriotic soldier, a patriotic American. It's one of the reasons he was in Special Forces for so many years. It wasn't just one tour of duty," end quote. So posts from social media suggest that he was pro-Ukraine and may have been involved in helping recruit military contractors for the conflict. On his LinkedIn account, Livelsberger commented on a post advertising a 30-day contract in Ukraine for a tactical combat casualty care instructor. He said he's got someone, a Special Forces medical sergeant, who was ready to go, and said that he sent them your way. And then there's a picture of him from 2016, believed to be him from his wife's, or who is believed to be his ex-wife's Facebook page, and he's wearing a shirt, a red and black shirt that says "Slava Ukraini," glory to Ukraine, the nationalist slogan. It's become much more popular since the Russian invasion. But this was in 2016. So I mentioned Ryan Ruth, who was arrested in September 2024 for allegedly trying to assassinate Trump. He was very pro-Ukraine and helped recruit for Ukraine's Foreign Legion. So potential motive for him was Trump's rhetoric about the war in Ukraine on the campaign trail. This guy, Livelsberger, all we have is the LinkedIn comment so far and the picture with the Ukraine shirt. Ryan Ruth, he had a whole bunch of posts online, really crazy stuff about Ukraine. So it was clear that that was a motive for him. But this guy, not so clear. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. So we'll see if this becomes clearer. But it's just very strange. 2 incidents like this in the same day, 2 U.S. Army guys. And really the only update, I left up the same story from yesterday about the tragedy in New Orleans. Really the only update here is that the FBI said they walked back that he was likely had help. They said now it looks like he acted alone and it was an act of terrorism. So they're saying, they were talking about videos with people planting IEDs, but now they're saying, no, it looks like he completely acted alone. All right, so the next one here, getting into Gaza, really heavy attacks. Israeli attacks on Gaza kill more than 90. So Israeli strikes have ramped up across the Gaza Strip, killing over 90 Palestinians since dawn on Thursday. Medical sources told Al Jazeera early Friday morning Gaza time. So this was throughout the whole day Thursday. More than 90 were killed. And Israeli attacks included a strike on a tent camp in Al-Mawasi, which is the so-called safe zone that Israel is constantly bombing. Again, this is a tent camp that they're bombing here. The attack killed at least 12 Palestinians, including several children, and the head of Gaza's now defunct police force. Walid al-Bardawil, a survivor of the attack, lost 3 of his sons. Muhammad, age 13, Ahmed, age 11, and Abdul Rahman, who is only 7 years old. He said, quote, "The Israeli army called this place a safe zone. Their claims are all lies and slander," end quote. You see the picture here of the aftermath? Again, this is tents that they're bombing. And another survivor of the attack said that the tent camp was hit at 1 a.m. without any sort of warning and said, quote, "The next thing we knew, our world was engulfed in flames. Children were torn apart. Women were torn apart. It was like the day of judgment," end quote. So Gaza's government media office said the attack also killed Major General Mahmoud Salah. He was the director general of the police force in Gaza, and another police official was killed as well. So Israel has targeted the police force. They basically completely dismantled it. And this has been a big problem because there's no proper security force for the aid deliveries, and it's led to all this looting from armed gangs, which Israel has been allowing to happen, according to a report from Haaretz. And I think it's pretty clear that they're letting this chaos happen on the ground. It's part of their blockade, their starvation blockade. Other Israeli attacks included strikes. There was strikes all over in Gaza City in the north, which killed at least 6. In Khan Yunis, which killed another 6. A photographer was killed for a news organization. So another journalist, media worker was killed. Just an absolute slaughter. And this comes a day after Katz, the Israeli foreign minister, said that they were going to threaten to increase strikes on Gaza. So just absolutely horrific. 2025 is just not off to a good start when it comes to Gaza. All right, so the next one here, Representative Massie says the House rules package protects Netanyahu. So Representative Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, has called out House leadership for including a bill as part of a proposed rules package designed to protect Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So this is the rules package that sets certain rules for the House. And what did they include in this? A bill to sanction the International Criminal Court. And the way this works is that they're going to vote on this on Friday. The new Congress, the new House, is going to vote for their House Speaker. Right after that, they vote for the rules package, and this is included in there. So Massie wrote on X, again, so this is sanctions on the ICC. This is a response to the ICC going after Netanyahu and Gallant. They also issued a warrant for Mohammed Daif, who's Hamas's military leader. Massie wrote on X, quote, "The United States is a sovereign country, so I don't assign any credibility to the decisions of the International Criminal Court. But how did a bill to protect Netanyahu make it into the House rules package to be voted on immediately after the Speaker vote? Where are our priorities?" End quote. So the bill would impose sanctions with respect to the ICC engaged in any effort to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute any protected person of the United States and its allies. The House did pass a bill to sanction the ICC last year, but it was not taken up in the Senate. And it did receive a lot of support from Democrats. A lot of Democrats are on board with this, but for the most part, this is a Republican-led push here. And now we're going to have Republican-controlled House, Senate, and Trump in the White House. There's going to be so much pro-Israel legislation. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be bad on this front. Massie is often the sole Republican in the House who votes against pro-Israel legislation, and he's been outspoken about the influence of the Israel lobby. He did this interview with Tucker Carlson last year where he said every member of Congress, Republican member of Congress besides him, has an AIPAC babysitter. And Massie has also gone against his party by opposing the re-election of Speaker Mike Johnson, who's been endorsed by Donald Trump. Johnson played the key role in that $95 billion foreign military aid bill last year. So this is who is most likely going to be the elected House Speaker again on Friday. All right, so the next one here, Israel to surge funding for global influence operations. This article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So Tel Aviv is planning to increase its funding for global propaganda efforts by 20 times. The surge in spending comes as Israel's public image is sagging around the world over the onslaught in Gaza. A new budget for the Israeli Foreign Ministry includes $150 million for what Israel calls Hasbara, or consciousness warfare. According to the Times of Israel, the new budget is a 20-fold increase from the previous spending level. So expect to see some more propaganda out there. The images, videos, and reports from Gaza detailing the horrors experienced by innocent civilians have driven global protests against Israel, and in the U.S., Israel's most crucial supporter, Israel's favorability has plummeted. The new spending on Hasbara is the result of a demand by newly appointed Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar. He secured the appointment from Netanyahu, who is looking to maintain his hold on power as he battles multiple corruption charges. And Sa'ar was kind of against Netanyahu for a while, but after the Lebanon thing, he threw his support behind him. So according to the Israeli outlet Mariv, quote, "The program will include, among other things, research activity and public relations firms, social networks, campaign management, conferences and events, bringing delegations of public opinion leaders to Israel, activity on campuses around the world, and political legal activity, end quote. You know that they are going to go for the college campuses in the U.S., where there's protests against what's happening in Gaza. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. sets up a new base in North Syria near Turkey. So this article is from Jason Ditz. At a time when Turkey is warning the U.S. to end its support for Syrian Kurds, the U.S. and its coalition partners appear to be heading in the opposite direction. The U.S. is reportedly building a new military base in the Kurdish-majority city of Kobani, right on the Turkish border, which seems like a very dangerous place to put U.S. troops, considering all this fighting between the Kurds and the Turks and their allies in Syria. The U.S. has been backing the Kurdish SDF for years, to the chagrin of Turkey and its allies in the self-proclaimed Syrian National Army. In recent weeks, intense fighting has erupted between the SDF and Turkey and their partners in the SNA, the Syrian National Army. The fighting has been centered around the city of Manbij, which is further west than Kobani, but also along the same Syria-Turkey border. Again, just a very dangerous area to be establishing a new military base. And the fighting has continued. They've been exchanging artillery strikes, and there's fighting on the ground between the Kurds and Turkey and these Turkish-backed forces. And the U.S. is going to throw a new military base right in the middle of it. All right, so the next one here, Zelensky says Ukraine to establish diplomatic ties with HTS-Led Syria. So on Thursday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he was working to reestablish diplomatic ties with Syria following the takeover of the country by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which is a U.S.-designated terrorist organization and an offshoot of al-Qaeda. Zelensky said, quote, "We are preparing to renew our diplomatic relations with Syria and our cooperation within international organizations. I want to thank our intelligence for the security framework of these contacts," end quote. So his comments came after Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha visited Syria and met with HTS officials, including Syria's de facto leader, Jelani, who's been going by his real name, Ahmed al-Shara, and that's how you see him in all the media reports now. He's Shara, which, it is his real name, but I feel like I'm still going to use Jelani, or at least mention Jelani, because that's how he's been known for the past 10 years or so, more than that, as this al-Qaeda fighter. Now he's wearing suits and courting the West and everything. Ukraine severed diplomatic relations with Syria in 2022 after former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad recognized the independence of the Donetsk and Luhansk republics in eastern Ukraine. So they're ready to open up ties with this HTS government. Ukrainian intelligence supported the HTS takeover by providing drones and drone operators to HTS fighters in Idlib a few weeks before the offensive. So that's Ukraine providing material support to a U.S. designated terrorist group. Not that the U.S. is upset about that or anything. As I always say, I think the whole terror designation thing is completely flawed, and that's how you end up justifying all these attacks on civilians like we see in Gaza and Lebanon. But it just goes to show, again, they point to the terrorist designations to justify anything Israel does, bombing hospitals, completely flattening residential buildings. Over in Syria, a group with that same designation takes over, and because they took out Assad, an ally of Iran, the U.S. is celebrating, making it clear they're ready to play ball with these guys. They took the bounty off Jelani's head. HTS is still designated as a terrorist organization. We'll see with the Trump administration how they approach it. All right, so the next one here, Israeli troops advance deeper into southern Lebanon. This is from Jason. If that sounds like a familiar story, it's because we've had quite a few, because they continue to go deeper into Lebanon. So Israel's military continued its invasion of southern Lebanon today, despite the 60-day ceasefire in place during which it's meant to vacate the country. The village of Beit Lif was the latest target, with Israeli Merkava tanks and military bulldozers arriving at the outskirts of town and shelling the area. Israeli troops armed with machine guns also invaded the neighboring towns of Yatir and Ramiyah. These towns and villages are not far from the Israeli border, but they were not occupied at the time of the ceasefire. Israel has taken multiple villages in different parts of southern Lebanon since the ceasefire began, and has only withdrawn from a handful. And of course, we call it a ceasefire, but Israel's been violating it the whole time. They've killed over 30 people in Lebanon. And there's been persistent reports of Israeli bulldozers leveling civilian homes across South Lebanon. They're not only pushing further in, they're doing more demolitions and everything. So it's almost 40 days of this so-called ceasefire. And Hezbollah is saying that if Israeli troops are still there after the 60 days are up, then they're going to, then they didn't say it explicitly, but they made it sound like then they're going to start attacking the Israeli troops. All right. So the next one here, Slovakia threatens to cut energy supply to Ukraine. This is another one from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. NATO member Slovakia is threatening to cut off its supply of energy to Ukraine over Kiev ending a gas transit agreement with Moscow. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico called Kiev's move an act of sabotage by Zelensky. In a video post to his social media on Thursday, he said, quote, "I declare my SMER SSD party are ready to debate and agree in the coalition on halting supplies of electricity on significant lowering of support for Ukrainian citizens in Slovakia. The only alternative for a sovereign Slovakia is renewal of transit or demanding compensation mechanisms that will replace the loss in public finances of nearly 500 million euros, end quote. So this is over that gas transit agreement that ended between Russia and Ukraine. And that was a pipeline that goes through Ukraine and delivers gas to Slovakia and then goes on to the Czech Republic and Austria. So Slovakia, got a lot of gas from that pipeline, and Fico is trying to get this deal extended, but Ukraine refused. Ukraine chose not to renew the deal, so he might do some countermeasures here. And he's an opponent of the NATO proxy war in Ukraine. When he came into office, he ended Slovakia's military aid to Ukraine. All right, so the last story here, South Korea standoff as investigators try to detain Yoon. So this article is from the Yonhap news agency. So I haven't really covered South Korea since after the whole situation with Yoon, when kind of the initial martial law happened. We covered it, but I haven't been following it too closely. But basically, Yoon is facing arrest and he's resisting arrest. And there's a little standoff happening right now in South Korea. So investigators attempting to execute a warrant to detain impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol over his failed martial law bid have been locked in a standoff with a military unit inside the presidential residence, a police official said Friday. So I guess some elements of the military are backing Yoon. The Corruption Investigation Office for High-Ranking Officials said in a notice to the press that it had begun executing the warrant, but the police official said investigators were blocked from entering the residence building by a military unit presumed to belong to the Capitol Defense Command. The CIO has until Monday to execute the detention warrant on charges of insurrection and abuse of power linked to Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law on December 3rd. There's some pictures here. Well, just one picture here. Apparently, Yoon supporters are outside the residence as well. Rallies by Yoon supporters outside the presidential residence, however, have complicated the CIO's efforts, along with the potential for clashes with the Presidential Security Service. Thousands of supporters have gathered near the residence in recent days to oppose Yoon's impeachment and block his arrest. Some have been forcibly dispersed by the police and carried away by their limbs. So there's a standoff as of recording of this Thursday night here in the U.S., late Friday now, probably in South Korea. It looks like this standoff is still going on, but they have through the weekend to actually arrest him. So we'll see what happens. But this is, Yoon, very unpopular president when he decided to make this move to declare martial law. He was very liked in Washington, D.C. President Biden gave him very warm receptions when he visited. He sang American Pie with President Biden. Biden sent some nuclear-armed submarines over there to stoke tensions with North Korea. They really got along, those two, but didn't seem like the Koreans were too happy with them. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. We have one from Norman Solomon. Why Congress members face a lawsuit for funding Israel's war on Gaza. One from Karis Michelangelo. Provoked the long train of abuses that culminated in the Ukraine war. about Scott Horton's great book that I have here that you should all go buy. Provoked. Ramzi Baroud, A Palestinian Year in Review, Genocide, Resistance, and Unanswered Questions. One from David Vine, Mauritius isn't planning to give U.S. base at Diego Garcia to China. And our spotlights from Kit Clarenberg, Manufacturing Rebels, How the U.S. and the U.K. Empowered HTS. So please go check all of that out. That's everything. That's it for the week. I hope everybody has a good weekend. You could always support this show by liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We're on TikTok now. We have about 1,100 followers over there. Not doing too bad. So go check all that out. I'll be back after the weekend. Again, I hope everyone has a good one. Thanks for listening.